Here we go, round 2 of the bureaucracy. What do they do, as in what do bureaucrats do? Of all of the government organizations, bureaucrats have the most diverse population. They range in age, gender, religion, ethnicity, and geographic location in the country. This is an oversimplification of the role of the bureaucracies. But when Congress makes a law, such as motor vehicles need to be safer, they rely on bureaucratic agencies in order to come up with specifications of the law. So, for example, if Congress were to make this very vague law, the Department of Transportation would be in charge of making very specific pieces of the legislation, such as people must wear seatbelts, cars must be equipped with airbags, and there should be backup warning if a car is about to bump into something. All of these laws and specific regulations are then recorded in the Federal Register. The Federal Register is where all of the laws that are written in the United States are kept and recorded. There are many criticisms of the bureaucracy and shortcomings. We'll cover just a few. The first and biggest criticism of the bureaucracy is something known as red tape, or standard operating procedures. These procedures are actually put in place for a very good reason. It's so that everyone who comes in contact with the bureaucracy is treated equally and fairly. However, for most people, this is just seen as a huge hassle. Some examples of red tape or standard operating procedures are forms, paperwork, and fees that you have to pay in order to do something. For people your age, think about what you need to do in order to obtain a driver's license. You must first pass a written test. You must prove that you've had several hours driving. You must take driver's ed. You must pass a driver's test. You have to pay a fee. You have to fill out many forms and have lots of paperwork in order to prove that you can be a driver. This is a great example of standard operating procedures, or of red tape. One of the other criticisms of bureaucracies is that they have a lack of resources. One of the biggest examples of this happened after Hurricane Katrina. FEMA, or the Federal Emergency Management Association, was put in charge of cleaning up after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. However, they lacked a whole lot of resources and weren't really able to help the people of New Orleans. They ended up getting a huge amount of criticism for providing people of New Orleans with leaky trailers to live in and trailers that were infested with diseases. There's also a considerable amount of consistency. We see here, if Congress is unclear in their goals, it's going to make it very difficult for the bureaucracies to implement those goals. One of the best examples of this is Title IX. In Title IX, it intended to level the playing field between men and women. One of the biggest ways that people thought this was going to happen was through girls' sports. In the years following Title IX, it was determined that football was a special organization and was not upheld to the same standards as in Title IX. And so many women who wanted to play sports like football or rugby were left out of the game, and equal funding was not provided for a similar girls' sport. One of the other problems with the bureaucracy is fragmentation. This is when there are many departments that are responsible for overseeing just one component of the government. For example, the U.S. border is controlled by 40 different agencies. That's way too many people controlling just one thing, and so it gets very difficult to effectively make sure that border control is handled safely. Another criticism is something known as street-level bureaucrats. Street-level bureaucrats are the bureaucrats who come into contact with people on a consistent basis. You can think of these people as police officers or customs agents or the people who check your luggage in airports. These people, one of the biggest criticisms with these bureaucrats is they practice a great level of discretion. There's not really a handbook that they refer to when they have an issue with a disgruntled air passenger or with a poor driver. They have to make up their own mind about what the best choice is, and sometimes that means that the choices they make are different for varying consumers or customers. This leads people to believe that sometimes government agencies have favorites or are racist or perform their jobs unfairly. Who regulates the regulators? So we know that the bureaucratic agencies are the ones who enforce regulations that are made by Congress. But what happens if these government agencies aren't doing their jobs? There's really two branches who can oversee the bureaucracy. Congress performs oversight as part of the Iron Triangle, which we'll discuss more later. Four of the biggest things that they can do if bureaucratic agencies aren't doing their job is they can cut funding in the next year's budget. They can rewrite legislation to provide more clarity to something that they've already made. They can hold hearings with government agencies to make sure that they're doing their job, or they can influence presidential appointments to the head of government agencies. On the other hand, the president can also do many things to oversee bureaucracies, and this might possibly be the worst drawing ever. That's supposed to be the president, and it kind of looks like an alien. My apologies, President Obama. Anyway, the president is responsible for appointing agency heads. If he or she is unhappy with the agency head that they've appointed, that person can be pressured to step down or resign, and a new agency head can come in. They also can issue executive orders if they're not particularly pleased with something that Congress or a bureaucratic agency is doing. And lastly, since they're the ones who begin the broad budget process to begin with, they can request cuts to budgets for specific agencies. I hope that helps clarify some things about the criticisms and shortcomings of agencies and how the government tries to keep agencies in check. Please stay tuned for the final segment on bureaucracies, Part 3, Deregulation.